Chapter 29. On the way to the spiritual class, I noticed that my friend's vocabulary started changing. It now consisted of more good words, positive points, and wise thoughts. They even collectively decided to get rid of parasite words which they had often used in their phrases before. They came up with an idea that if someone blabs a bad word, he or she would buy chebureki or pirozhki for everyone. When I made a slip like that myself, I also began to watch my speech more carefully and particularly my thoughts. A small but quite well-trampled snowy pathway had been beaten to our secret glade. Volodya, Stas, Zhenya, Sensei, and Nikolai Andreevich were already standing there. After joining this power club, we heard a continuation of the conversation that had been interrupted by our arrival. But using hypnosis in our practice, we discovered that it switches off consciousness and works directly with subconsciousness, the psychotherapist recounted with enthusiasm. And we made a conclusion that there is no concrete knowledge in subconsciousness at all. It perceives everything as it is. If we suggest to a person that he's a singer, though he has never sung in his life, he will sing. If we give him an onion and say that it's a sweet apple, he eats it with pleasure without even wincing and so forth. We even repeated a series of experiments carried out by our colleagues from the capital city on the inhibition of reactions to stimuli in cells of the cerebral cortex when a person is in the state of hypnosis. We applied a vial with hot water, about 65 degrees Celsius, to the hand of a man under hypnosis and rang a loud bell. Yet there was no reaction to this kind of an irritant in his hand vessels. The level of the plethysmogram didn't change. The man, hypnotized not to respond to those stimuli, said that he felt nothing, and his facial expressions confirmed that. Or we would induce in him such somatic effects which are impossible to evoke at will. For example, we said that a piece of ordinary paper was a mustard patch, in which case a corresponding redness appeared on the surface of his skin where we applied the paper. In other words, a man in a state of hypnosis literally executed all our commands, from psychological image to body reactions. Absolutely right, answered Sensei, because hypnosis is actually an utmost manifestation of the animal nature in a human. It's a deprivation of the mind and a disconnection from the soul. Hypnosis is only a function of subconsciousness. In hypnosis, a human becomes who he really is if he is completely overtaken by the animal nature. He becomes a zombie, to put it simply, an obedient piece of meat, or, as Omar Khayyam correctly noted, a bag with bones, tendons, and bloody mucus. Who are zombies? Tatiana asked. Zombies were what African tribes called people whose psyche was programmed in a certain way by means of narcotic substances and special psychic influences. These people unquestioningly executed any order of a tribe chief and could kill not only themselves but even their own mothers and children. In short, a zombie is a human body from which the soul has been removed or disconnected, and this person has been deprived of the mind, answered Sensei. Then, addressing Nikolai Andreevich, he continued, Hypnosis means hacking a personality. It is aggression and slavery. And you will definitely find no knowledge there, except dumb animal obedience. I don't completely agree with you regarding dumb animal obedience, protested Nikolai Andreevich. As far as I know, the self of a hypnotized person keeps control of reality all the time and can be restored at any moment. A hypnotist can influence only something that a patient unconsciously agrees with. As it is written in medical research works, the mechanism of resistance and protection is not completely turned off. If all this were as you say, hypnosis wouldn't have been used so actively by intelligence services in all developed countries of the world. You yourself know that all the newest discoveries and technologies, as well as the best ways of fishing out information and methods of control over the human psyche, are used, first of all, in the military interests of countries, and only a minor part of them is used for peaceful purposes. Well, okay, but hypnosis can also be used in healthcare to cure some diseases. You won't deny this fact, will you? I will. What is disease? It is, first of all, a signal from the body about a possible serious disorder in its functions and tissues. Post-hypnotic suggestion left by a hypnotist and later executed by the human mind as its own idea merely eliminates this signal of pain, but doesn't remove the cause of the disease. Indeed, for some time, a person won't feel the pain, deceiving himself with elusive hopes. But in reality, he will cause himself even more harm because the disease will continue progressing and will eventually manifest itself in an even worse neglected state. To be cured by hypnosis doesn't mean to be healthy because with such healing, even a light form of one disease can beget another disease, a more serious one. But what about those habits which patients acquire when a medical effect manifests itself? It has been proven many times that bad habits disappear, while good ones, on the contrary, are formed and instilled, and the mind itself starts working differently. Why? How do you explain that? Everything is very simple. Under hypnosis, as a rule, the mind is in a state of a trusting listener. In other words, it looks at everything as an outsider, without any analysis whatsoever. If in the state of hypnosis, the mind is commanded not to listen or to forget or to change habits, it will execute it all precisely. And afterwards, it will perceive this command as its own idea. Our mind is imperfect, very imperfect. The soul is perfect and its capabilities are limitless. But the soul is switched off when a person is hypnotized, because there is a clear awakening of the animal nature in him. Naturally, the soul loses and can no longer influence the mind. Therefore, generally speaking, hypnosis is awful for people. What if something good is suggested to a person? It doesn't matter. But susceptibility to hypnosis is inherent in all people, just to a different degree and in different forms. Of course, just like the presence of the spiritual and animal natures is inherent in all people to different degrees. However, hypnosis has common features with other altered states of consciousness, such as sleep or meditation. Hypnosis is also attained by a reduction of the influx of signals into the brain, and before it, a person also focuses on one sensor stimulus. Yes, but you've listed features that are typical for the beginning of any method of altering the state of consciousness. The main distinction of hypnosis is in the flow of this state itself, which is reflected at the physical level as well. I would call hypnosis a state of command duplication. Take a look at how it manifests itself at the physiological level. If you compare it with sleep or meditation, the content of oxygen and carbon dioxide doesn't change as it happens in those other states. Unlike the other altered states of consciousness, hypnosis isn't accompanied by a physical deviation from the state of wakefulness. Waves of the electroencephalogram, brain waves, most often remain the same as in a wakeful person, and so on. These are merely the facts that your science can actually detect at this stage. Meanwhile, meditation is a completely different altered state of consciousness. Even the very term meditation, which comes from Latin, means reflection. Meditation is a state in which you attain the highest degree of concentration of attention on a certain object, or, on the contrary, complete deconcentration of attention. In this state, the processes of perception and thinking are halted, and there's a sort of sensory isolation of a person from the external world, and a full concentration on the internal spiritual world, the spiritual essence. It's natural that at the physiological level, this kind of psychic immobilization, associated with temporary disconnection of major integrative mechanisms of the brain, contributes to recovery of the person's nervous and psychic functions, bringing a feeling of freshness, inner rejuvenation, and joy of life. As for hypnosis, it causes personality's depression at the subconscious level, thus forming a slavish mental state in the person's consciousness. There is also another curious aspect of meditations. Normal functioning of sensory organs during wakefulness creates a high level of internal noise in the central nervous system, which impedes the flow of processes of association and integration. During meditation, the level of internal noise in the brain becomes extremely low. As a result, a person gains an opportunity to use associative and integrative processes for completion of certain tasks that he formulates for himself, So, hypnosis and meditation are two completely different states of consciousness. Meditation is one of the ways to awaken the spiritual nature, whereas hypnosis, I emphasize, is just a function of the animal nature. But during hypnosis, at least for psychotherapeutic purposes, we can actually instill in a person confidence in his own strength and capabilities. Nikolai Andreevich just couldn't let it go. Hypnosis can hardly be used to instill confidence in one's strength because it increases suggestibility and submission to another person's will. This is something unnatural to the essence of a human and his true mission in life because internally, at the subconscious level, he strives for true freedom, the freedom of his soul. That is why, during their lifetime, people always strive for independence, self-assertion, and any form of external freedom. If you really want to help a person change and believe in his own strength and capabilities, convince him with your words, your thoughts, and your argumentation, since the power of word revives the power of thought, while the power of thought generates action. But under no circumstances should you use hypnosis as an outright command into a person's subconsciousness. For you don't know what you are doing because you are unaware of the true nature of hypnosis and the negative forces it awakens in a human. Nikolai Andreevich was standing deep in thought. Meanwhile, the last of the guys arrived at the glade. Greeting them, Sensei said, "All right, everyone is here. I guess we'll start. Today, we will do the same meditation as last time, on purification of thoughts from negativity. For those who were absent, I will repeat. So, stand comfortably, with your feet at shoulder's width. The fingers on each of your hands should be spread apart, and should touch the fingers of the other hand with their tips at the level of your belly, tip to tip. In other words, thumb to thumb, forefinger to forefinger, and so on. Like this." Sensei showed me this connection. It is necessary to relax by removing all thoughts and to focus only on normal breathing. Then, once you have achieved a state of full relaxation of all your extremities and a feeling of inner peace, you begin to imagine that you are a jug. That is, the upper part of your head is as if cut off like in a jug. The source of water is the soul. This water fills your entire body and ultimately overflows, spilling over the edge of the jug, streaming down your body into the ground. During this process, as the water fills the body and flows out into the ground, it takes with it all the bad thoughts and all the problems. In other words, all the dirt and unrest present in your mind. It's as if you internally purify yourselves from all of that, and when you purify yourselves this way, you begin to feel a clear division between the soul and thoughts. Moreover, the soul located inside of you and the soul located above the jug, which is observing the process. Eventually, by practicing this meditation every day, you purify your thoughts of negativity and further learn to control them, all the while keeping your mind in a clean state. Any questions? "Why should the hands touch exactly this way?" I asked. "Because during this meditation, certain energies circulate inside the body. I'll tell you about them someday, while the fingertips sort of close the circuit. Moreover, there is stimulation of the skin nerve receptors located on the fingertips, which affects the brain in a positive and calming way. Are there any other questions?" Everyone remained silent. "Then let's begin." Under Sensei's guidance, we began to perform this meditation. I tried to imagine myself as a jug, but my imagination formed this image somehow only halfway, because my mind just couldn't agree with this definition. So I stopped trying to prove anything to myself and simply thought, I'm a jug, and focused on the internal source of water. At that moment, an interesting feeling appeared, as if my consciousness plunged inside of me, into the soul, and concentrated in a point in the solar plexus area. That point began to gradually expand, with crystal clear water spiraling in it. Finally, there was so much water that it poured over, filling my entire body with its pleasant spreading moisture. Having filled the vessel this way, this pleasant feeling flowed over the edge. A wave of gentle tingling started running over my body from top to bottom, as if flowing into the ground. I imagined that my body was being cleansed of all bad thoughts, and at a certain moment, I felt so nice, so cozy, and so joyful inside that I couldn't resist and slightly deviated from the meditation, thanking God internally from the bottom of my soul for everything that He gave me in life and for His immense love for His children. The next moment, I suddenly discovered that my consciousness, or rather my true self, was seemingly above my body, and the body itself didn't look like a body at all. From its jug-like head, there emanated thousands of thin, multicolored threads which were flowing into the ground in a continuous movement. Meanwhile, in the depth of the jug, something bright was shining, transforming those threads into more vivid colors. The beauty was simply spellbinding. But then I heard Sensei's melodious voice, reaching me from somewhere far away. Now take 2 deep, rapid breaths in and out. Quickly clench and unclench your fists. Open your eyes. I quickly came to my senses, though the state of the inner euphoria remained somewhere in the depth of my true self. As it later turned out, each of the guys experienced this state differently. The senior guys did it better than I did, while for my friends it all happened at the level of bare imagination. Sensei told them that many people experience that at first. However, if a person practices persistently at home every day and has a desire to improve his moral qualities, after a while he can experience new sensations and later learn to constantly control his thoughts. The main thing is to believe in oneself and one's powers, and not to be lazy. When we were leaving the glade, I took a moment to quietly ask the teacher, "The guys told me that when I was absent, you gave them new meditations. I probably missed out on a lot. What should I do now?" Sensei glanced at me very kindly and replied, "Believe me, the one who does good deeds with good thoughts has no need to be sad about something missed, for he gains a lot more power for cognition of his soul than when being idle." At that moment, I certainly didn't understand what Sensei meant because I considered everything I did to be ordinary everyday activities. Nevertheless, these words got so ingrained in my soul that the very same evening a corresponding entry appeared in my diary. Days flew by in a blink of an eye. I enjoyed the new meditation so much that I performed it with pleasure before going to bed, just like all the previous meditations. Once I asked Sensei whether it's harmful to do them one after another in one evening. He replied that, quite on the contrary, it was very useful because this way a person works more on himself spiritually, while the lotus flower also awakens the soul. It's better to perform them in the evening before going to bed and in the morning when you wake up. These are the simplest meditations to work on the concentration of attention, the awakening of inner vision, and control over thoughts. They are absolutely harmless. That's why everyone can learn them, even those who have never come across spiritual practices. At the same time, these meditations, along with their simplicity and accessibility, are the most effective. Chapter 30. At the training, I tried to catch up with the guys, doing my best to study both the new and the old techniques. These days, everything interesting and educational was happening at the spiritual classes. At one of such classes, Nikolai Andreevich began to argue with Sensei about reincarnation. It seemed to me that he wasn't really arguing, but rather provoking the teacher, in order to start a conversation about it. I noticed that, although Nikolai Andreevich was a psychotherapist, a zealous atheist, and the common sense of our group, as we jokingly nicknamed him, he didn't miss a single class and treated Sensei with delicate respect. Reincarnation is a fable invented by people because the prevailing majority, I would say, have pathological thanatophobia. That's why they make up various tales about reincarnation and life after death. Not at all, objected Sensei. When it comes to fear of death, it is generated solely by the animal nature in a human being, by the instinct of self-preservation and the power of imagination, fostered by egoistic negativity. Fear is just an emotion, triggered only where information is absent or where there is too little of it. The phenomenon of reincarnation really exists in nature, and you cannot even imagine how long it has existed. Recently, Sensei had started addressing Nikolai Andreevich in a familiar way, like a friend. No, if it were really so, we would remember something, some fragments or something else. Do you remember what happened this very day a year ago? Sensei asked. Nikolai Andreevich reflected and said with uncertainty, I was probably at work, if it wasn't Sunday. So you cannot really recall this day. I can't. Here you go. Then what can be said about some other times and whether you had a previous life? We already discussed, in regard to that very hypnosis, that there is mind, there is the animal nature, and there is the soul. You are located in the soul, the true, real you. Mind is that part of you which perceives, and a particle of your inner self is located there as well. It means that you are divided. In your soul, you feel yourself as one person, while you think completely differently. Take a moment and reflect on yourself, who you really are, how you think, how you speak, and how you see. Not in the meaning of brain activity, verbal or nonverbal communication, or excitation of acoustic fields. All that is rubbish. But the true you, look inside of your consciousness. It is actually infinite. Think about how boundless outer space is. And try to explain the fact that every atom of your body mirrors the universe. Does an atom really mirror the universe? Nikolai Andreevich was surprised. Of course, if you doubt this, check relevant literature on the atom structure and compare it with the structure of the universe. Even the knowledge available nowadays is enough to support realization of this fact. Or take vacuum, for example. It is empty, it looks like there is nothing in it, at first glance. But life is born in it. Out of what? Out of emptiness? Think about these global questions. Think seriously. But most importantly, find out, who are you? Then you will understand that your body is just a carriage that carries you from birth to death, from one reincarnation to another. Where you arrive will depend on how you use this carriage. Either it will run by itself or you will drive it. A human, that is, his soul, is just the coachman in this carriage. If your soul is asleep, the carriage will rumble in the same direction as others do. The coachman will be riding in circles. But if the soul wakes up, he will drive in the right direction, the direction of spiritual development, in the one he himself chooses. But the main thing is that a person will understand that he is the coachman of this carriage. Having realized that, he will be able to simply stop riding in circles and leave for nirvana. In other words, he will become similar to gods. All the guys were listening to Sensei with great attention. Meanwhile, I gathered enough courage and asked the teacher my troubling question. Could you please explain, what is the purpose of existence of the soul, I mean of me? The purpose is simple, to eventually come to God as a mature creature. A human is a synthesis of the spiritual and the animal natures. This synthesis is necessary so that the soul would gain a certain form. It has to go through matter, in other words, to mature. A human, like a butterfly, goes through the stages of development of his soul. Metaphorically speaking, at first, hatching from an egg, a human goes through the material stage of a larva, or a human as animal. When he crawls on earth and has prevailing material interests, like a caterpillar, he doesn't see a soul in himself and considers himself to be a single whole with his matter, meaning with his body. Then a certain period of realization passes, either in the course of several reincarnations from one to another, or during one life. That's different for everyone. When his soul matures in virtuous thoughts of spiritual love, gradually, the human transforms into a cocoon, into the stage of a human as human, when he becomes clearly aware of his true self, the soul, and the cocoon, the body. Now the body is regarded just as matter for maturation of his soul. Externally, it may not show in any way, but internally, turbulent and radical changes take place in him. In the end, when the soul finally matures, the cocoon bursts open, and a glaringly beautiful divine creature flies out of it, a butterfly. A soul that is free in its flight. Joining other beautiful creatures, it takes part in the birth of new souls, the creation of new larvae that will follow the same path. This is actually the stage of a human as God. Therefore, the whole purpose lies in the evolution from animal to divine, in order to become a fully fledged particle of God. This is embedded in us from the very beginning, deep inside. That's why we search for God, and that's why we know about God. Nikolai Andreevich smiled and said, "What if I'm an atheist and deny God?" Nobody really denies God, whoever a person is, because everyone feels it in their soul. Everyone is scared in the darkness, no matter how courageous they are. And everyone thinks about eternity, about death, about the meaning of their life and their existence. It's just that many people turn on the protective functions of their psyche and try to muffle these thoughts when they do not have enough information. Well, that's how I am. I need real proof. If I really came across a case of at least a memory of past reincarnation, I would believe it by verifying it for myself. Sensei thought for a moment and answered, "All right, I will grant you such an opportunity. After the class, I will tell you about an interesting technique of altering the state of consciousness, which will let you awaken a human soul and summon it for a conversation. But I'm warning you, nobody else should know about this technique because society is still at the stage of a human as animal. People will receive this knowledge in due time, when the majority of them transition to the stage of a human as human. With any of your patients, you can do everything exactly as I tell you. But, jumping ahead, I'm warning you right away that in reincarnations, the notion of time as such is absent. In other words, for example, one person lived 200 years ago and is reborn only now. Another one died a year ago and was born in a minute, while a third one may have lived in a distant future and was born in our time, and so forth. I mean, there are certain laws there, so don't be too surprised. Agreed? Of course, Nikolai Andreevich uttered with admiration. Stas, who had been silent before, asked thoughtfully, "Concerning reincarnation, do people in Shambhala also undergo it? Or do they exist eternally?" "If you mean the life of the Bodhisattvas inside of Shambhala, they exist under completely different laws, and they don't have such bodily, coarse matter as people have. In Shambhala, there is a completely different side of reality. Well, for you to understand it better, their bodies are subtle matter which exists under its own laws in time and space. And while in the human world, the mind serves the body. At home, I mean in Shambhala," the teacher quickly corrected himself, "the body serves the mind." Why can't Shambhala be found? Because it exists at a completely different frequency level of perception. "So a human cannot get there in his body?" Andre asked with surprise. "Why? He can if he knows and is able to transform his body to that frequency of the perception of reality." "This sounds like science fiction," Kostya sniffed under his breath. "For today's human perception, it may be so, but it's a fact. If people believe that this is science fiction, no problem. But a human cannot make up anything on his own because all this knowledge has existed, exists, and will exist regardless of his desire. His capabilities of cognition are limited only by his egocentrism. Generally speaking, science fiction in its essence is just an unrealized reality." "Then how do these superior beings come into this world? You said that, if needed, they can get into contact with people on their own." "As usual, through reincarnation. Their soul enters the body of a newborn infant on the 8th day, just like all people are born." "I wonder," remarked Nikolai Andreevich, "what made you think that the soul enters a human on the 8th day of life? In the Christian religion, for example, it is believed that the soul enters him while he is still in his mother's womb. That's a mistaken belief. Evidently, someone understood something incorrectly, another person incorrectly translated it, and a third one added something from his logic. That's how true knowledge was lost. Same as always. In reality, the soul enters a human body on the 8th day. This can even be detected. Even though it's an energy substance, still, when entering a body, the soul acquires the quality of subtle matter. That's why the weight of a newborn baby sharply increases on the 8th day from 3 to 20 grams, and sometimes, in exceptional cases, up to 50 grams. This can really be detected if you measure the weight of a newborn starting from the 7th day, taking into account what he ingests and excretes. In other words, on the 8th day, there is a sharp increase in the weight of a newborn baby. Moreover, exactly on the 8th day, the gaze of a child becomes alive and luminous. It's impossible not to notice that. How do bodhisattvas differ from ordinary people later on? Kostya asked with interest. They don't differ at all. They are consciously reborn into matter of a human in order to experience all the severities, hardships, and also temptations of this world. And in the course of their human lives, they make the contribution required of them. Sometimes they come to the earth with a certain goal, to implement a decision made in Shambhala, but most often as observers. Bodhisattvas live as ordinary people, quietly and modestly performing their work. Although inside, this human is quite aware that he's a bodhisattva. But he will never shout about that or beat his chest. As a rule, no one around them knows about it. This could be anyone, your close friend, your acquaintance, relative, and so forth. Why do they come as observers? Asked Victor. Really? Why? I thought. Our world will probably appear to be too dirty and egoistic to these higher beings. Well, they have such a rule, or, to be more precise, a duty. Each of the bodhisattvas of Shambhala must come into this world through incarnation at least once every 1,000 years. What for? In order to live a human life, to see how and what humankind thinks about, and at what level people should be given knowledge. In other words, bodhisattvas need to know human nature because in Shambhala, the animal nature is absent in individuals. The reality is completely different there. So, for a bodhisattva who lives there, to understand what is going on here, he is thrown into this world so that he doesn't forget and doesn't relax too much, so to say. Even Rigden Japo cannot avoid this rule and this fate. However, he usually comes into this world before the beginning of global changes in the life of human civilization, approximately once every 10 or 12,000 years, not as a messiah, but as a judge. He checks the work of his subordinate predecessors, assessing the level of people's perception, the degree of their spirituality or preoccupation with matter. Depending on that, Shambhala then reaches a verdict whether humanity will continue to exist or not. What do you mean? Well, if humankind in its majority is evaluated as a spiritually progressing society, then it is preserved. Whereas if more of the beast, meaning the material essence, prevails in it, then the same story of global cataclysms that affected some of the previous civilizations is repeated. And less than 1/10 of the total human population are left for breeding the matter for the souls of the next civilization. Mankind chooses the path for itself, while the actions of Shambhala are just consequences of that choice. As I understood it, Victor joined the conversation, their main mission is the spiritual development of humankind. You are almost right, answered Sensei. Their main mission assigned from above, in other words, from the cosmic hierarchy or God, call it as you wish, is upbringing of the human soul during all cycles of its reincarnation. They actively help its development only when the spiritual nature awakens in a human. I bet this egoistic world seems horrible from the point of view of their spirituality. I spoke my thoughts out loud. Sensei grinned. Indeed, it's not quite a gift. This reincarnation is similar to a butterfly being stuffed into a caterpillar. It's inconvenient for the butterfly and uncomfortable for the caterpillar. But such are the rules. Each bodhisattva should serve his term here by living an entire life. Although any bodhisattva is free to depart to nirvana any minute, it's a big temptation for them. You once said that a bodhisattva is a human who left nirvana for the sake of humankind. Certainly, that's why this is a double temptation for him, because he has felt this state of a peak of unearthly happiness. You simply cannot imagine what kind of a feat it is to leave nirvana and to come here. Figuratively speaking, bodhisattvas may be compared to those who are the best of the best volunteers that have been sent to do the most crucial work. Bodhisattvas stay here for the sake of people, for the sake of upbringing human souls. so that these souls can develop and become free, truly free. Because this is what our inner essence, our soul, strives for every single moment of life. Sensei glanced at his watch and said, "All right, guys, it's time to do meditation. Otherwise, we could continue debating until morning." I looked at my watch too. Time had flown by in this conversation as if it were just 1 second. Also, I had a strange feeling as if there was no time at all, as if it was a moment of eternity that had slightly opened the veil of its mysteries. We performed the same meditation as at the previous classes, aimed at cleansing our thoughts. This time I felt the water streaming from the jug more clearly, with some kind of wavy movements. After the class, the teacher reminded us to continuously learn to control our thoughts and fish out negative parasites of consciousness. He also emphasized that we shouldn't give in to our aggression if it appears, and most importantly, we should constantly nourish divine love in ourselves by performing the lotus flower. Nikolai Andreevich stayed at the glade, while we said goodbye and went home. Chapter 31. I was so amazed by the knowledge that Sensei was conveying to us so simply and clearly that I wrote down the whole conversation in my diary, highlighting the most important points. It turns out that the purpose of human existence is the perfection of one's soul. I had felt this but wasn't sure. Now once again I thought that this notion changed everything I had been considering valuable and important in life. I looked around and thought, we really live life entirely for our bodies. Even in my room in our apartment, whatever you look at, everything existed for the service and satisfaction of bodily needs. Books were probably the only exception. Of course, Sensei had once said that all these attributes of civilization are necessary merely for us to have more time for the development of our souls. But how much of all this unnecessary stuff is completely redundant? Yet we think it's not enough for us, and we still want something more. What for? Why? After all, tomorrow we might die. While there, they will evaluate what we have cultivated inside of ourselves, and not how much dust we have collected by the tireless work of our shell, half rotten in soil. All these days I was sort of reappraising my values, even at school. Girls, as usual, were showing off whatever fashionable rags were bought for them, and with obvious envy, spoke about what they saw on others. Listening to them, I was surprised at myself because before, I had been exactly the same. I had been chasing some kind of short-lived fashion that didn't completely suit me. Yet, my megalomania would blow up when at that time, I had an opportunity to stand out from the crowd. Although by and large, only the things that suit a person are always in fashion. And that's it. Some of my once fashionable clothes, after a one-time show, were now hanging like dead weight in the closet. Why does one human need so much stuff? What do I need it for? Aren't there places where people have nothing to wear? And why look far away? There were 3 girls from poor families right under my nose, in my own class. 2 of them didn't have fathers because they had died in the mines, while the father of the 3rd girl was a drunkard, which is even worse. Why couldn't I share my clothes with them? They needed it more than my persona. I asked for my mother's advice, although I lied to her a little bit, saying that our school had organized a charity drive, and my mother didn't object. We even found shoes for the girls. I gathered all that and then faced another problem. How would I give it to them? Putting myself in their place, I considered that the best option would be to ask my class teacher to pass the clothes and shoes to them as if from a charitable organization. I believe she liked this idea because a week later, a charitable action was proclaimed throughout our school to benefit children from the city orphanage on our teacher's initiative. Hearing this news, I once again recalled Sensei's words that a good thought and a good deed begets a chain reaction of kind thoughts and kind deeds. I thought that if everyone understood this and did whatever good deeds they could, perhaps poverty and hunger would disappear across the world. Otherwise, it is somehow shameful to be called civilized when somebody nearby is starving or extremely needy. At such thoughts of universal love, brotherhood, and mutual help, my body was seized by some kind of an excited tingle. A feeling of slight pleasant pressure started spreading in the area of my solar plexus. Reaching a certain size, it began to emanate waves of shivers that made consciousness even more thrilled, increasing the feeling of boundless love for the whole world. Chapter 32. At the next additional training session, we were learning the new kata with interest and diligence. The speedy guys never ceased to impress us with their mastery. They were sparring with each other with captivating beauty and thunder-like speed. Observing their movements, Andre complained to the teacher, "How do they move so quickly? It seems like we do the same kata, but no matter how hard I try, I still fall extremely behind. They move almost twice as fast as I do. Why?" "It all has to do with balance, that's the whole trick," answered Sensei. "But I keep balance properly, as I was taught before when I first got into karate. In my opinion, I follow all the rules and distribute the center of gravity the way I should. However, I can't do it like them, because you move the center of gravity while they follow the center of gravity." "How is that?" Andre was surprised. "Well, the center of gravity is located in the hara, or as it is also called, the Dan-Tien point, which is 3 fingers below the navel. Remember, I told you about that once. Everyone teaches to hold the center of gravity correctly, to walk, to move it, and so on. For example, you were told that a standing man doesn't fall down until the vertical line from the center of gravity is located inside a platform, confined by the edges of his feet. That walking is a series of falls forward, prevented by timely moving of the pivot foot. That running is a series of jumps from one foot to another, with a corresponding shift of the body weight and the center of gravity. Right? Right. In other words, everyone teaches the general rules of moving the center of gravity. But that's exactly why they lose in speed. Because in order to increase speed and to teach the body to move, one needs to learn, first of all, to move the center of gravity. "Can I learn it too, or am I hopeless?" Andre asked with a smile. "Only fools and lazy people are hopeless," Sensei replied just as ironically. "Basically, everyone can learn it. There is an elementary technique for shifting one's center of gravity. I mean, it's almost the same as dynamic meditation. First, you practice a breathing technique. In any arbitrary movements, when you move your hands away from your body, you inhale. When your hands come towards you, you exhale. Step forward, inhale, step back, exhale. You exhale into the bottom of your stomach, into the hara, which is similar to how we exhaled through the hands during meditation. In other words, during the exhale, you concentrate your attention and focus entirely on this point on the belly, as if slightly straining it right in the area of hara. Eventually, you begin to control your derived breath in this way, and the main thing is to feel this place, to feel your center of gravity. What kind of movements do I need to perform? Is there any sequence? Any. Whatever you want, it doesn't matter. If you want to, you can warm up, practice kata, or simply walk in circles or make bows. It doesn't matter. The main work is done by your thought and concentration. This is the first stage, to find your exact center of gravity and to feel it during any movements. The second stage is expansion of the center of gravity point concentrated in the hara. In other words, you mentally send the qi energy to it. And this point, thanks to the concentration of the energy of air, expands and becomes round and dense. It turns into a little sphere or ball, into whatever you like to imagine. The important thing is that you sort of feel it physically, as if something is there, for example, a big round ball from a bearing or something similar. And the third stage is the most important. With the power of your will, you move this center of gravity while everything follows it. Wherever you are and whatever you do, you continuously perform this dynamic meditation. Just like the lotus flower? Andre asked. Absolutely right, just like that. By the way, one doesn't interfere with the other. Yet, no matter how you move and wherever you go, you should first move not your body, but your center of gravity with your mind, while the body should learn to keep up with it. That is all, everything is simple. Andre reflected and started to try moving while working on his breath. Just look at how you usually move, Sensei pointed out. You first bring forward your shoulder, your leg, your head, and so on. I mean, you first bring forward some part of your body, and then your center of gravity. And now look at the guys. See, they start all movements exactly from the hara point. The bottom of their belly goes forward first, and then the body follows it, no matter how quickly or slowly they move. Now I get it, Kostya joined in the conversation, also carefully listening to the teacher together with us. We couldn't understand what distinguishes you and the guys all the time when you walk. It turns out it's your unusual gait. Sensei spread his arms and said with a smile, "It's a habit." Our first attempts ended with loud laughter because everyone tried to learn everything at once. But all we managed to do was to walk like penguins. That's when Sensei remarked, "Guys, I told you, you first need to learn to breathe, to feel your center of gravity, and only then to move it." "And how do they accelerate their movements?" asked Andre, nodding towards the speedy guys. "Do we need to do something special for that?" Actually, no. You can accelerate just with an exhale. In other words, with the power of your thought, pushing forward the center of gravity. As you move your hand just by thinking about it. So in this case, you must move your center of gravity freely by sending a mental command. And when you learn to shift your center of gravity at the speed of thought, you'll be able to move as quickly as your physical condition will permit. Your body will only need to have time to catch up with your center of gravity. "Great," uttered Andre. "Any sprinting competition can be won in this way." "That's for sure. If this technique were known to athletes, they would win all the gold medals at world championships," Sensei answered half in jest. "Don't any of them know about this?" "Unfortunately not." "I've never heard about it and never even read about it either," Kostya confessed honestly, to our surprise. "But why?" "Well, this is a very ancient technique for the development of human abilities, and superiors of ancient monasteries keep it a secret. They don't even tell their disciples about it and save it for their own use as one of the special secret techniques. Although, in fact, there is nothing special about it. It's not even an art. It's an ordinary technique that anyone can master, though possibly more effective than the rest." The entire way home, our group was walking with our chests out with pride. No wonder. For us to learn the secrets known only to masters of ancient monasteries was beyond even our wildest dreams. I was amazed once again by Sensei's knowledge of ancient techniques. When guessing who he is, I wrote down in my diary that Sensei was probably also a talented Orientalist scholar, or maybe he knew those regions very well, or he grew up there. Otherwise, how did he get this knowledge? One mystery gave rise to yet another mystery. Sensei undoubtedly knew a lot, starting from philosophy and ending with exact sciences. And it was all based on a foundation of some science unknown to me, of the fundamental knowledge about a human being, starting with the micro-universe in the endlessly dividing atom and ending with the invisible, yet very much perceptible by me, soul, or rather the mystery of its creation. Who is he? I asked myself over and over again,